economic ideology as a nation, as the masses are educated, influenced, whichever word you use, it is really education. We are educating the masses. We are changing them. Education is not just the schools. Education is what we are talking about, what the people end up learning and living. So every time I use the word education, I want you to look at the broader perspective of it, that we are looking at not just educating the children, but the masses. The masses are being educated. That's how God looked at education in Israel. Everybody, every family, every husband, every father was responsible for educating. Were they going to school just learning mathematics and geography? No, they're learning everything about hygiene, about what is clean and unclean, about living a holy life. It was a holistic education, which included the head, which is the academic part. It included the heart, which means character. It included the hands, which means skills. It included the house, which means that I must be responsible for my neighbor. I must be considerate. I am aware that I'm not alone. I'm aware that I have other people around me. As much as I love myself, I should love my neighbor the same way I love myself. That was the education instituted by God in the nation of Israel. And that's what made it an outstanding nation. It changed the whole culture of these slaves, the slaves who came out of Egypt, a nation of slaves that had never known anything but slavery. They didn't know how to lead each other. They had so many things they were lacking. And yet, God understood that in order to change this nation of slaves, I have to institute the program of Barnabas Some, education for all. And so that's why the primary school in Israel was the family. We put at the lowest of the institution, that is the family. So the primary school was the family. The secondary was later developed into what we call the synagogues. Those were later developed, but the temple was the university. So initially, when they were still in the wilderness, they didn't have synagogues and they didn't have the temple, meaning they were so young, all of them were still going through primary, which is the family. As the nation started to develop and caught up with all that they had to learn, then institutions were being developed. And the way the Lord told them to, for example, he taught them about politics in a very, very simple way that we read yesterday in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 9 to 17. And he was telling them how they're going to govern themselves. How are we going to govern ourselves? You are going to choose men, the people whom you see to be men of integrity, men who are wise at every level. So meaning every 10 homes will have a leader. He was teaching them about arbitration, about negotiations, because now one man is going to lead 10 families, meaning every 10 families will have a leader, a judge, but they can handle issues at that level. So every 10 families had a leader. They could run to him anytime they had conflict. So the conflicts were quickly resolved. Is solving conflicts an important aspect of the social life of any tribe or any nation? Very, very important. If conflicts are not solved quickly, then mob justice starts to arise. Errant behavior starts to proliferate. Somebody steals, and another person from whom things have been stolen cannot get justice. There is anger, there is bitterness. Then you find somebody went and murdered the other one because 3 years ago that issue was never resolved. These issues are very, very important in a nation, in a tribe, in a clan, in a community, in any people who live together, conflicts that remain unresolved. Therefore, for God, the education he was giving to this nation included every aspect of life, which includes government. This is the local government I'm talking about now. So he's teaching them that every 10 families choose a wise leader. He'll be able to handle issues of conflict very quickly. He'll use his wisdom to ensure that those 10 families are happy. If there is any conflict, it has been solved amicably. If there is restitution that has to be made, you took somebody's goat, you need to pay them back. So that thing is sorted. So in case they are not satisfied, then that matter is escalated to the next level. This one leads only 10 families. Now he has handled it in a way that one of the contestants is not satisfied. So the matter is escalated to the next leader. This next leader is like the court of appeal. So if you are taking the magistrate court and moving on to the upper, then the chief magistrate, then the judge, something like that. So you have an appellate court, but the lowest is the one who is handling the 10 families. And the conflicts are quickly resolved so that people don't spend their energies and time in fighting unnecessary battles, because conflicts are quickly resolved. The judge for 10 families is not too busy to handle those 10 cases. Those 10 families. If it's to do with girls who have to marry, boys who are marrying them, if it's to do with dowry, if it's to do with whatever issue that you may rise up. Remember, this nation is a nation of slaves. They have been in Egypt, where they were run on kiboko. They were just being beaten. There was no consultation. There was not. So they're going to be taught now how to talk and discuss matters of mutual interest in their own community. This is how God quickly developed a nation. It develops not in just a loop-sided way, meaning we're just handling one area. No, it's holistic. Daily, they are learning the law of God. God has given them a law. When we read it today, some of these may not make a lot of sense to us, but in that time when you're dealing with, for example, when you're helping children, many times you don't have to explain to them everything. Even if you did, they would not understand them. For example, if you're teaching a child to be careful when they are traveling on the road, you're living in a city or near a busy road, you give them strict instructions. If it is to do, you are sending them in the garden, you may not be very strict. The implications in the garden of failure to follow your instructions may not be dire, may not involve life. So when you are sending them to the garden or teaching them to dig, you may use simple instructions that when you are digging, make sure you don't cut vegetables. The implications of cutting a vegetable is not really very big. So you may not put very stringent penalties in case the child cuts the vegetables and so on. But if you are sending them across the road to buy from a shop and the road is very busy, you must get their attention. You say, whenever I send you to buy sugar or anything from the shop, before you get to the road, make sure you stand, you go slowly, don't run. That's number one. Number two, when you get to the road, look left. Then look right. Then look left again. If there is no vehicle coming or border coming, then you can cross. You have to make sure you look left, then you look right, then you look left again. So meaning, because life is involved, you are more strict because their life is involved, and you even put penalty. If I see you crossing and you don't look left and you don't look right, I'm going to do, so you include the penalties, and they have to be stand penalties, because that's when you can get the attention of their emotions. Emotions are attached to our safety. And so you involve stand penalties because of any failure for this child. Because you know what? If they don't do that, you may end up losing them. They can end up dying. They can be knocked by vehicle, by borders. So in the Old Testament, what you see is that God is teaching a nation education. The law which he gave them was the education of the nation. And it is put in the day-to-day life. Because education there is holistic, it is head, it is heart, it is hands, and it is house. It includes every aspect of life. And the penalties are inbuilt. If you cross the road without doing what I've told you, this is what will happen. So you'll find the penalties that he gives on certain things will tell you the implications of those sins. If they are committed, what those sins will do to the community is the explanation of the seriousness of the penalty. For example, every time you find any adulterer, kill them both. Now, for us today, we would say, what? That's too big to stand. Why such a drastic measure? Because those people were taken like the young child whom you tell that if you cross the road without looking at both sides and then the first side again, I will do A, B, C, D. What you are doing is to save that child. It's not because you are you really want to punish that child. No. You are doing it out of love to save their lives. And whenever if you see them, for example, running and just crossing the road, you'll call them, even if that time they didn't have any problem. You'll call them and make sure you spank them. Because now that today they have been able to do it without any repercussion to it, but the next day there may be board a vehicle and they may knock them and they die. So if you find any two people committing adultery, you kill them both. What God is communicating is that if you allow that adultery, that death I've told you as a penalty is what that adultery is going to do to the whole community. It's going to kill the family institution. It's going to dilute it. The impact it will have on the children of the adulterers, on the families of the two families. The man is married, the woman is married. Now they have committed adultery. Both their spouses are affected, their children are affected, but the whole community is affected. If you allow adultery in the community, the whole community is going to die. That is the penalty he's giving. That's the language they can understand for now. The language these slaves can understand. They don't have a complicated or sophisticated mind, so they only understand those simple rules. When you find a child who disobeys or curses his father, the community will come together and stone him. Wow. Now that is talking about rebellion in the community and the impact it will have. The overall impact of rebellion to authority is embedded in that command number 5, honor your parents. That is what will happen to a community that allows rebellion. Rebellion will result into witchcraft, and the effect of witchcraft is dire, and so on. So God gives those instructions and penalties in the law to safeguard the health, the prosperity, the safety of the whole community. So these judges are instituted on separate levels to ensure that these simple rules that have been put in the law on a daily basis, or on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, they're being implemented. And the leaders at the lowest level are the supervisors. So that's why the nation grew very, very, very fast. Now, this is the principle throughout the Bible. Now, yesterday and a few days ago, I was showing you why or how we as Christians are supposed to influence public policy. This is what the homosexuals have done. Although they are a very small fraction, they have been able to influence a nation like America so much that you may think every American is homosexual. Yet they don't even constitute 5% of the population of America. Even in their headquarters in San Francisco, they're not even 5%. They are very few, yet very, very, very influential at the moment. Can you imagine that the whole foreign policy of America now is such that unless you give freedom, you facilitate the homosexuals, we can no longer give you our support. Can you imagine? A group of less than 5%. Only about 30 years ago or 50 years ago, if you spoke about that word, it would be very shameful. Not many people would even talk about the word homosexual. But now, It has become an alternative lifestyle, and it is being promoted as if it is a wonderful alternative lifestyle. They even have a day, June 1st, they get pride. They call it a pride, when before that it was a shame. Now it's a pride. So we need to, that's why I wanted to explain this, so that you can see our role, our responsibility. How do we influence public policy? I'm calling that, if each of those words is important. Influence public policy. We influence, we don't force ourselves on people. Homosexuals did not initially force themselves. They influenced. Now they are forcing. They are now using the economic muscle and the military muscle of America to impose policy, not just to influence. They have been doing the influence for the last 40 years. Now, they are even forcing, they're not just influencing. Why is this important? Because that's how nations are discipled. To disciple a nation, the currency is influence. You influence a nation, a community, to disciple it. Jesus sent us to disciple nations. Go ye therefore and disciple nations. So we are called to disciple nations. So, and that's how nations are discipled. The first is the theology. The second, which follows the theology, is the philosophy of life. Next to that, you'll influence the political ideology and the economic theory that that political entity or nation espouses. And finally, those theories and ideologies will end up into policies and the laws. That's how nations are governed. And I gave examples, and I've put them here, and I've shown you the difference, for example, between Judeo-Christian theology and Islam, and Hinduism, Buddhism, atheism, humanism. The current now is humanism. Humanism is taking over, where people are saying, we don't need God, or God is not there. Man, they don't even mention that. They just say man is his own God. That is humanism. Humanism is a theology and it is a religion, because religion is what people put their faith in. Here in humanism, people are deifying themselves. Deify the deity. Man is the deity. Man is the God to himself. Man is the origin, the center, the final, the goal, worshiping man. The humanistic education at the moment is very dangerous. It's a theology and it is a religion. Many people don't look at it that way, but that's exactly what it is. Because once you deify human being, you have removed that fear of God. Now people no longer fear God. You are telling them you are God to yourself. Do what you want, what you enjoy. The results of that are such that people live an immoral life. They're a lot to themselves. They're rejecting all forms of absolute. Absolutism is where you say this is wrong, this is right. So they're removing all that. There's nothing like This is wrong, this is right. They want to remove all that so that people are free to do what they want. In humanism, the belief is this issue determinism. I want you to see here, when the religion or theology is humanistic, the implication is that there is no God, first of all. Man is a God to himself. And what affects man is his environment. They call that determinism. So I'm influenced by the things around me. That is social determinism. I'm not created this way or that way. I'm not created male or female. I'm influenced by the things around me. Or genetically, that's what I am. Genetics, the things which determine my life is the social things around me, the genetic, that means how I was born, the genes, all of us understand the genes, or the chemical, because animals and plants, the effect on them is mainly chemical. You know what we call the chemistry. That kind of thing. That the people are affected only by the influence around them. And so the philosophy of life has to do with the social relationships. That's why social media becomes very, very, very important, because it's on that social media that the peers influence each other. The currency here is influence. So where you have young people influencing each other by the social behavior, by the social communication, by that, the influence moves much faster than what it used to be during our time. You had to interact in the village. We would meet during the time of collecting water walls in the water wells. In the villages, women would meet in the evening when they have gone to collect water. That's when they would socialize and influence each other. But the youth of today, they don't need to meet. In fact, many of them meet on social media and then they choose each other, to love each other, to marry each other on the social media. We had the former president here, Vinaisa, who on the social media ended up getting, I think it was a Japanese, met a Japanese online, and they said we get to marry. And then, now that is what is going on. And because nobody controls that area, the impact on the youth, on their values, on their what they take in, what they hear, what they receive, what you only God knows what actually goes on the social media, the level of interaction, the level of influence, bad or good, is immeasurable. So when the church starts to desire to influence the nation, we must think about this, because if not, we'll be outdated. We have to influence people in the various spheres where they are. This is a sphere where as a church, we must target. So our education must go into the very realms where the many youth are, the young people, because they are, at the moment when the results of the census came out, it was very clear the percentages were alarming. Uganda is a very young country. Look at what happened in Kenya. These riotous youth, they started rioting. They did not have a leader. They just started communicating. And then they agreed, we're going to storm the parliament, we're going to storm this, we're going to go. And spontaneously, all over the country, they were doing that in various cities and towns. That is the power of the thing I'm talking about. When this power is harnessed to do good, it's wonderful. But look at what it has done in mobilizing for homosexuality, LGBTQ. Look at the power of its mobilization. Look at the power of its influence, influencing the youth in various areas. So humanism is not just an ideology, it's a religion, because it replaces God and people become, they start to believe their faith is in themselves. They are the God to themselves. So then the philosophy of life, and then when it comes to political ideology and economic theory, the moment you remove God, now you've removed a restraint and a moral restraint. Then people can live the way they want. Now, in the approach that we used when we were discussing, for example, when we were discussing the atheists, they said man is material, he has no spirit. So you remove the moral aspect of man, it's just material. The whole thing is about material. The motivation is material and financial, nothing else, not spiritual, because there is no accountability in the end. Everything is here. Once you die, that's it. There is no day of reckoning. That is serious. That's very serious. When people start to live in such a way that they say there is no day of reckoning, there is no accountability. If you're given money and nobody is going to ask you how you used it, think about the power and the freedom you have to spend. There is no audit. There will be no auditor general. There will be nobody to question. It will never be found out. That's why much of our corruption is succeeding here, because the audits, you can beat any system, you can pay off the auditor, you can pay off the institution that is supposed to come and investigate you. Once you are sure of that, then you don't have any accountability to give. So that's what humanism and the atheism does, because it removes that aspect of life accountability. I will not be accountable to my life. Nobody will ever ask me how I lived. So I can womanize, I can cheat, I can lie, I can do anything I want with my life. So let me enjoy it as much as I want. Suppose the drinking or drugs never had any effect. Why would not anybody drink? Because after all, it has no effect, no law of sowing and reaping. So people start to live a very, very loose life. And so where you have that society of no accountability, the political ideology will be totalitarian, because they know the only way you control such people, you have to use police, you have to use force. There's no other form. Where people have no moral compass, the only thing you have to control them is by using force. That's why atheists, communists they use force, fear. In China, they find you with drugs, you are killed. So when you remove the fear of God, you have to replace it with the fear of the state. So the state becomes a god. So where you have humanism here, the philosophy of life will be this determinism, social, genetic, chemical. But the governments will be totalitarian because they become the god to the people. The only fear people have is government. So the government uses a very strong arm to instill fear. In North Korea, that president, that young man who was a student in Kitande here now is president of North Korea, he's taken like a god. What he says, God, so God has been removed, but man was created to worship God. So you can't exist without God. Something else has to replace God. That something comes the state. That's what Stalin was. That's what Lenin was. Millions and millions of people were killed. Communism in those 70 years, it's estimated that more than 200 million people died because of communism. But where you've removed God, it means all those people go scot-free and no accountability whatsoever. And sometimes they would cause people to hunger and even die. So because they were fighting to attain power, there was no political dissent. You could not say anything against Stalin, against Lenin, against the communist government. Even in a communist convention where they would go to discuss, if by any means you say something that sounds like not being in line with what Lenin or Stalin, in the next few days it will be eliminated. So it becomes totalitarian. Totalitarian governments are a result of a humanistic government, a humanistic theology or religion, atheist religion. Atheism and humanism result into the political ideology of totalitarianism. Totalitarian just means the state and their leaders are have absolute power over you, including over your life. They have power over your life. They can take away life. And fascism. So then all the laws and policies will be dictatorial, dictatorship. Here, when Amin took over, he ruled by decrees. There was no parliament. He wakes up in the morning. One morning he was in Karamoja, and he says, I dreamt that I had to chase away all the Indians. So you can imagine the whole fate of the nation hanging on the dreams of an individual. So that day he came back to Kampala and said, I give you 90 days, that is 3 months. All of you Indians, you must leave. So there was no parliament, there was no cabinet to consult, nothing. It just comes up, something, declares it, and has to be done. They ask him, what if they are not able to, because how can all these Indians, millions of them, leave the country in such a short time? They're not even airplanes. He said, let them, anybody, after 90 days, you wait and see. So all of them, some of them just got their families and drove into the waters in Lake Victoria. But that was it. No reasoning, nothing. Nothing. So this is the template, as I've said. And for us as Christians now, we need to understand that God is counting on us to instill an education that will result into this flow, that the Judeo-Christian religion, without forcing it over on the people, will influence their philosophy of life, to value life, that is the dignity of life, to value freedom of every soul, freedom of conscience, freedom of the press, freedom of all that, then it make every single individual responsible, emphasizing responsibility. The young people today don't want responsibility. They're blaming everybody. They're blaming their parents. They're blaming their teachers. They're blaming their village. It is true some of these people have failed, but that's not the first time. In every generation, parents have been delinquent in one way or another. But because people were responsible, they took responsibility of their condition and they worked accordingly. But in our generation, when people are denying responsibility, they become very demanding, very, very demanding. This generation demands. Government at college, so for them, there is no problem. They want to eat, drink, sleep until 11 a.m. They have a sense of entitlement. A sense of entitlement just means to wait. Children demand for iPhones. So the parents have to sell cows and whatever they can to meet the demands. Entitlement flows from irresponsibility. So when the Judeo-Christian theology is espoused, it makes people responsible so that they understand I'm responsible for my life. If my parents were not able to educate me, now I'm old enough, I can do my own education at any level. And when people are responsible, the flip on the other side is accountability. Where you have irresponsibility, you'll find that people don't want accountability. So accountability is important because you're responsible for your life. Therefore, you're responsible for the choices you make. Those choices you make or you made, they made you. You cannot run away from that responsibility. So responsible people understand that we make choices and I'm responsible for the choices I made. That's accountability. I'm responsible for the choices I made. If I fail to make the right choices, now I'm responsible for the repercussions and for whatever I'm living now, whatever I'm going through. And then that philosophy of life also includes the freedom of conscience. Freedom of conscience includes the freedom to religion. Whatever religion you espouse or want, you worship God in your spirit, and in truth, meaning that the state cannot dictate on you how to worship, what to worship. Every freedom, you see, in America, they have that separation of church and state, although it was misused. The liberals now misuse that amendment when the first amendment of the Constitution of the US emphasizing that separation meaning they had seen what was going on in Europe, where leaders like the Bloody Mary in England was killed about 300 clergy just because he didn't want them to believe in a certain way. So when they came in America, they said, no, the state should never dictate the religion people espouse, meaning everybody should have the freedom to worship the way they want. They made sure right from the beginning in their rights as Americans. The first thing is you cannot be forced by the state to worship in any way. That's why you find religions proliferating in America. Any religion. That's where cults come from. Mormon, all of them. Because the state is not supposed to interfere with your freedom of conscience. The state can come in if your cultic tendencies will result into crime. But as long as it's not crime, nobody can interfere with you. You can choose yourself to be a god, and tomorrow you can choose to be an angel. Because it's a matter of your faith, the state cannot interfere with that. Now, that came because many of them were running from Europe, where they were being persecuted. Some were being killed because of their religion. So freedom of conscience. Then morality has to do with what is right and what is wrong. Today, because of time, I'm not going to all the details, but morality, family, we would take a lesson almost a week for each of these. If I was to take just, for example, this responsibility thing, could take a whole week just discussing this matter of responsibility there. Each of these is a big topic. So when we are doing studies, where I teach in the college in the US, I take each of these separately. And my main purpose, I was asked by Andrew Womack, mainly to speak to the people, the third year students, before they go out, to bring to them this overall broader aspect of discipling the nation. So my course is called the Practical Government School, where I teach the school, the particular school in the faculty. We are various people. For me, I come in mainly to teach on these issues that have to do with the discipling of nations. And the people enjoy it. They have added 2 other classes that they want. The global class is the global training. They said this year, they said you need to speak to the global training because they're the ones who are going out to open Bible schools and to go out as missionaries. So we want them also to hear all these students. Why don't we have it here? As Bishop Kawi was saying, really, when you consider the hours we have here, every week you are in class. You have a class of 1 hour. By the time you're done in about a year, if you are really following, your perspective will start to change. So let me now end with the question. I think by what I've explained, you realize that automatically these things are applicable in every day-to-day life, because you don't even need to plan to apply them. Once you have the proper education in place, it will automatically percolate into the day-to-day life of a person. It's not just something you try to do. Your religion will affect your day, every day. If you believe that God is the source of your provision, you involve him in your business. The moment you get a new job, you covenant it to God. You give him the first fruit. If you're in a business, I did that when I started my business of computer on June 13th, 1993. I remember it in the afternoon. And I wrote 12 points and covenanted the business to God, entered in covenant with God. And then, so your religion will affect the way you live, will affect your economics, will affect your politics, and will affect the disciplines, the laws, the policy you live by. All this is totally applicable in every single thing. It will affect your family, the way you raise your children, what you teach them, how you treat them, all that, the way you treat your wife. If take an example of the issue of the Christian faith of one man, one woman, the impact of that is important. Very, very. Number one, if you only have one wife and she's the one you have to live with, it means whether you like it or not, you learn. Every time you disagree, you learn how to resolve the conflict because you only have one. But if you had three, every time one annoys you, go to the other. So you never resolve issues. Polygamy creates that. People who come from polygamous families never resolve issues. A wife, number one, annoys you, so you go to wife number two. When she annoys you or disagree, you go to wife number three. When she also has the next time you have a problem after 3 weeks, now by the time you go back to wife number one, she's just going to give in. She has nothing to do because otherwise you will not come back again. So conflicts are not resolved because of that polygamous kind of thing. And one side is always oppressed, another side is an oppressor. There is no conflict resolution. When you are living with the same wife, you have to resolve issues. You learn to discuss, you learn to give in, you learn what they call you to yield, say, okay, I'm sorry. So you learn to apologize. So look at the implications of that alone. It starts with the theology, but it's going to impact the philosophy of marriage, of family, of how you live with others. When you go to church, you'll be different when you come from such a family because issues were resolved. Okay, back to you, Bishop.
Yes. Thank you so much, Bishop. I wonder if we have any question in these few minutes left. Please unmute your microphone and ask. Otherwise, we are so grateful for the elaborate teaching and how this can apply to our every area of our lives. We still have some time, please. Saints, let's...
It can be comments, it can be, where you are, especially some of you work in the NGOs, you already know how these... Rosemary, did you say Rosemary Mukasa? Did you say you work with what? What was it? Was it an NGO? Was it Rosemary? Who was it? I don't remember who was discussing that. Rosemary, what did you say you are working with NGO with what? Hello? Unmute. I think you had muted. Okay. Maybe the connections are not good. Maybe I thought I remember as if sometime you were mentioning things around that family. Okay. I want to hear from you people. This is an open class.
Here is Nyasha saying thank you, Bishop. You talked about covenanting your business to Christ. I mean, I am new to this, and that is very interesting. I've never heard of that. Thank you. Thank you. Rosemary's connection is not good, but you can respond to Nyasha.
Nyasha, that is, yes, for us Christians, everything you get involved in, because you are in covenant with God, you also covenanted to God. The way to understand it, let's use children. God gives you children as free gifts. Our children are gifts. But what do you do when you get a baby? You take the baby back to God. And you covenant that baby back to God. We call it dedication. So Hannah, the mother of Samuel, realized the importance of that. She said, if you give me a male child, if you give me a son, I will covenant that child back to you, so that as long as he lives, he shall serve the Lord. And that's exactly what she did. When he was weaned at 3 years old, she took Samuel to Shiloh, where Eli, the priest, was, and dedicated. Now, that is the covenant. That applies not just to children, but first of all, look at the impact. Samuel is growing up with very wicked children. The children of Eli were very wicked. How did Samuel survive all that and become a great prophet of God? Because the covenant of his mother covenanted him to God. So anything you covenant to God, God takes full responsibility. What you don't covenant to him, he thinks you've retained it. It is yours. It's like money. You take part of the money you've received and take a tenth of it and give it to him. It dedicates that part, but also dedicates the 90 that you are not. You are celebrating the fact that God has given you. Just like the child, Samuel, I'm celebrating for receiving this child. Now that dedication and covenant also covered all the remaining children that Hannah got. Later, she didn't get just Samuel. She got other children. So the other children are all blessed because of this one. So that is also the principle of the tithe. It is the covenant principle of celebrating God. So the business, likewise, when you get a new job, you put it in covenant with God. And you say, Lord, I'm putting, and then you put some points down of your belief in as far as this job is concerned, or my career, or my new appointment. So when you do that, it is totally a different level. When what you have covenanted is no longer on a human level, it has now gone on the divine level. I can get some other time to teach about that, because today our time is done. This one is who? Okay. Can you read this one? Oh wow, my thanks you. I just had a baby 12 weeks ago and have been asking God if there is anything I should do with him. So that was such a specific example. Your response, thank you. Yes, Nyasha, go ahead and take that child and dedicate that child to God. What will happen is that from that moment, God will take hold of that child. So when you covenant a child, suppose you do not live to raise those children, you've dedicated, even when you're not around, Even when those children are far away, like Samuel was very far from his mother, God took care of the child because he was covenant. You've told God you are now fully responsible. This is your child. Children that you dedicate to God, he takes care of them. He makes sure he will be faithful to them. I saw to you because of that covenant. Number two, the covenant gives you supernatural power. When I covenanted my business to God, I experienced the supernatural power of God. God gives you power to get wealth that you would not get in your own power. Thank you.
Wow.
God bless you.
Bishop, we shall ask you to maybe in our Bible study to really share that. Many of us would love to know about the impact, the implication of covenanting, everything concerning us, like you are ending that you partake of that supernatural power. Many of us would love to hear that.
That is part of the theology of the Judeo-Christian ethic, because it is built on covenant. God's word comes to us in two covenants, the old and the new. And the Judeo-Christian theology or religion emphasizes covenant. When we come later on to see, you'll see that even the philosophy of life is built on covenant. So the economic theory is built on covenant, that when you are selling, you speak the truth because you're in covenant. Then the laws are made according. So we'll see that. I will get time to explain that as well.
Thank you so much. Now, saints, we thank God for this week. As far as our altar, we will resume this on Saturday concerning the altar at the 6 a.m. 6 a.m. Saturday is when we shall resume our national altar. Join us again tomorrow